today's episode of the Volleyball University podcast, we have our guest here, Lucia Longi. She is someone you've probably seen from a viral video that she posted on TikTok and Instagram. That's where I saw her, at least. So I saw her through the video. It's a B team to D1 commit video. And the main thing I noticed about the video is obviously it's a very cool video. But second thing was that in the comments, I noticed that she was trying to help other people who were reaching out to her. And the big thing that we do here at VBU is obviously trying to inspire others. And we are big on the underdog story, and she's certainly one of those. So I was like, I got to get her on the show. And, I reached out to her, and now we're here. So I'm going to kind of interview her, and she will be able to tell us her story. And then hopefully from there, others can be inspired by her story in more detail as well. Okay, so I guess to start, why don't you give us a quick introduction on like who you are in terms of what position you play or your height, age, all those things.
All right, for sure. Yes, as you said, my name is Lucia Langi. I'm from Austin, Texas, and then I am, I like to say I'm 5'11" with shoes on, middle blocker. I'm turning 18, and then I am planning on, I just signed to go play D1 ball at Utah Tech University.
Nice. Okay. And before we go into like your actual story, I want to talk about the video itself. I'm going to show the video before I start the podcast episode, but when you made the video, did you know it was going to blow up the way it did, or was there a story behind that? Or
yeah, so it's a good question. I have definitely made quite a few videos on TikTok and Instagram, showcasing my story in different formats, whether that be like you saw just a clip to clip or even story times. And, usually when I make those kinds of videos showing the before and after, they do pretty well, but more on TikTok. TikTok, obviously, the videos are able to blow up quicker, but on Instagram, they kind of do okay. But man, I checked my notifications and I saw I think earlier today I checked, it was 4.5 million views. I was not expecting that for that video. It did even better than there was another video I went viral for a few months back where I hit a girl in the face at one of my games. Yeah, they call a little Scott Sterling hit. Man, that video did better than that video on Instagram, but I'm actually really glad that was the video to go viral. I like knowing that there's a girl out there, a boy, anyone who plays volleyball or any sport that sees that video and goes, oh man, if she can do it, I can do it. So
yeah, exactly. Right. And I agree. I mean, I saw the other video too, the face shot. It's also a great video, but you're right. This video is a little more in terms of impact better. Right. But yeah, TikTok for me too. TikTok is definitely much easier to get views on and all that. But yours did good on both. So, it's a good video. It's a good video. And it's usually because it's a good story, right? So speaking of the story, let's kind of break it down a little bit. Kind of just start off with telling us when you first started playing volleyball, like how that came to be.
Okay, so whenever I first started playing volleyball, for context, my aunt and uncle, both big-time volleyball players up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, played college, some of the best coaches in that area. So I come from a volleyball family. And for that reason, my dad kept me away from volleyball, basically as long as he could, so I could try out all the other sports, just to see what I really loved. So then I finally started playing volleyball in my 7th grade year. I just kind of did it for fun. We could barely pass a ball over the net. There wasn't much to it. But I made B team that year. And then my 8th grade year, I was definitely more driven that year. I wanted to make A team. I was working really hard in all the drills and the practices. And that year, I was like, this is the year, man. This is my year for 18. My dad even told me, hey, if you want to spend this much time playing volleyball, you might want to, try to make 18 or something. Yeah. I was like, okay. So then I remember tryouts, went through it, felt great. And then I walked in the hallway into the locker room, and there was a list of names. And I remember seeing my name at the bottom of the list in the B team column. And my heart just sunk in my chest. And I think that was really whenever I started, developing that chip on my shoulder. I was pissed off, but it's you know what? It is what it is. Just try to have fun that year. Moving forward, 8th grade was when COVID hit for me. So I ended up having this crazy growth spurt. I went from 5'7" to 5'10". And so I showed up during the summer for our summer workouts. I did my best to outwork everyone, whether that be races, weightlifting, whatever. And I remember there was one specific drill where we were all doing our sprints. It was from the freshmen all the way up to the incoming seniors. And I remember this one race, I was pushing as hard as I could, and I beat like all the incoming seniors, got back to the line, and my coach just ripped into them like, that's an incoming freshman. How is she beating you at that? But that moment, and I think that whole little week really was whenever I first got my coach's attention because she saw my work ethic. So then the next week we were having our kind of like our developmental practices. So freshmen had their own, and then JV and varsity returners had theirs. And she messaged me and basically told us like, hey, not message, she came up to us and told us,
Right.
hey, we want you to come up to the JV varsity camp. And I was like, oh my gosh, because I was not, my technique did not exist. It was not there.
Yeah.
So definitely very intimidated walking into that practice. But I remember there's one girl who I love. Her name's Trista. She plays for Grand Canyon University. Big time baller there. She kind of took me under her wing that whole week. She was trying to teach me how to block. It was iffy. As I said, my technique wasn't really there, but the one thing I could do was jump.
Mm-hmm.
So I would jump up and throw my arms up in the air and try to get some blocks, which kind of worked out, I guess. And then my coach was like, hey, you know what? I want to put you on JV, so I can develop. And then she's like, hopefully by your junior year, you'll have gotten enough reps to be on varsity. And I was like, okay, sounds great. So went through the whole JV season, ended up starting midway through. Blocking got better and better. And that was pretty much my specialty, just throwing a block up there. I didn't really have an arm swing. Postseason meetings hit. And my coach called me into her office and she was like, her name's Coach Davis. She actually coaches in College Station now. So shout out Coach Davis. She started this whole thing really. But she said, Lucia, do you want to play college volleyball? And I was like, oh, I was kind of surprised, because college volleyball, I never thought that was in the cards for me. But I said yes. And she said, okay, well, if you want to play college volleyball, then you need lots of reps. You really got to catch up to the other girls your age. And she said the best way to do that is by playing club volleyball. Mm-hmm. So she recommended some clubs in the area, but the one she recommended the most was United Volleyball, which is about 45 minutes away from me. But it's run by Coach Tracy Smith, who is a proven developer, especially at the collegiate level. She worked at Texas State for 20 years as an assistant coach until she stepped away to spend more time with her family. And now she coaches us, and she is the best fit for me. She spent time before and after practices just helping me develop. And United is definitely the best decision we've ever made.
Is she currently your coach right now too for your 18th year, or you have a different coach?
This year she's not. Last year and the latter half of my 16th year she was my coach, but she before my 15th year was my first season playing ball. So she would have me come in and practice with the 13-year-olds for an hour before every practice. So she took a ton of time out to help me. And then
that's awesome. So before we jump into club season, because I want to cover a couple of things, I think you mentioned some good things that I want to touch back on. The first one that kind of stuck out to me was the chip on your shoulder, right? When you were on not just the B team, but probably on the bottom of the list, right? I think when you're talking about the underdog story, which is a big focus here, that chip on your shoulder is it's huge, because I feel like people say it's bad because it's a negative thing. It's but if it makes you pissed off in a good way, where you're, putting in good work, and obviously if you're a good person, it's very helpful, right? So do you feel like that chip on your shoulder has been super helpful for you in terms of just motivation?
I definitely think that chip on my shoulder has helped me, especially in the beginning. I think as I've gone on, continue to play, it's become less and less of that big factor, me being mad about a team I made. But it's definitely still there. I just think as you get older and mature in the sport, it kind of reveals itself in different forms, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're still technically a regularly pretty undersized middle for a D1 middle, right? So that's going to be a thing as well. And you can use it for positive. The second thing I wanted to touch on was, I forgot what her name was, but you said someone took you, she plays at GCU now, and she took you under her wing, right? So another thing that's important for the underdog too is that level of mentorship, right? Somebody who's going to guide you, because you can have the work ethic, you can have that chip on your shoulder, but you're still underdeveloped, you don't really know what you're doing. So how important was that to you, having someone to kind of guide you and take you where you want to go?
Yeah, I think Trista being there for me was incredibly influential in my development as a player. I remember my freshman year, since we had just gotten off of COVID, there was a bunch of things we had used to do that weren't in place. One of them was a little sister, big sister program.
Nice, yeah.
And even though that year we weren't having them, Trista went out of her way and basically told me, like, hey, I know we're not doing that, but you're still my little sister. So before every game, she would write me a letter just encouraging me, hyping me up, even giving me advice for the court. And that meant so much to me. I still have all those letters in my desk drawer. And throughout the years, we've continued to reach out to each other whenever I need help or advice. And the biggest thing was a few years ago, before my junior season, we were on FaceTime before I went in to go watch a college game. And she told me, like, hey, I have the block record for most total blocks in a single season at Hayes, and I think it'd be really awesome if you were the one to break that. So she challenged me right there in the car. Hey, you got to be the one to break the record. That's how I want it to be. I said, okay. So then my junior season, I worked really hard and I ended up breaking her record. So
Very
that's
nice.
just her influence on me is just,
Yeah,
she's been
that sounds
awesome.
awesome. Yeah, and even someone who like it's one thing to like take someone under your wing, but to truly say like because ideally when you're coaching someone or you're taking someone under your wing, you really do it well when you make them better than you, right? So if she's like, I want you to break my record, and you do that, that's like true mentorship, and that's like just great. So I knew there was more to that, so I wanted to ask about that. And then the third thing was like, so you have a chip on your shoulder, you have like someone to mentor you. And that's one was like your coaches believing in you, right? So like people believing in you because you don't really know like what you can achieve yet, right? You're like, you didn't think about college ball yet until your high school coach mentioned it. And then even when you played club, that coach believed in you. So what does it mean to have like people believing in you in terms of like your volleyball career and all that?
Yeah, I definitely think my coaches believing in me was definitely like a huge point of emphasis for me. That was incredibly important in my journey. But even before my coaches, and I think the reason why my coaches tell me that was so important to me is because the one person I heard it from my whole life was my dad.
Mhm.
And when it's your parents, you're not necessarily like, oh, okay, whatever, dad, whatever, like, okay. But I mentioned this in my speech at my signing day. My dad, whenever I was really little, he bought me this little pair of Nikes, my first tennis shoes, because he said when I was born, he knew I was going to be great. Like when my mom was pregnant with me, when they went to go find out the gender, he said, is it a defensive lineman or is it an outside hitter? So he knew from the beginning, but he kept me away because he believed in me so much. He didn't want to burn me out too early. So his belief, which then translated into my coach's belief in me, those driving forces together have meant everything to me. So my dad and my coaches, yeah, they've been life changing for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Now I guess let's jump back into your story and talk about like your club season, right? Your very first club season, I think you were 15s, right?
Yes.
Most people, I think in Texas, start playing at like 9 years old or something like that. Right? So you were a late player. How did your like first club season go in terms of just like the difference between high school and all that?
Yeah, so my first club season, it was definitely a lot. Just for my brain to process, our main goal, which my dad and my coach established that year, was to close the gap. And that was it. They didn't want me to worry about like this, that, all the extra stuff. They said, all we want you to do is work on closing your skill set to where it's just even with the other girls your age, we can go from there. So that first season, it was just really important for me to actually learn technique. Obviously I had skipped over a lot of it being in middle school and all that. So that year it was just really important for me to focus on technique and developing my IQ. And then after that club season, when I came back to high school, um, my coach saw the huge jump I made in skill. It was definitely like unprecedented. We definitely thought it was going to take a lot longer for
Mhm.
me to get to that place because, as I said earlier, she originally had seen me going to play at varsity my junior year, maybe. But
Right.
when I came back, I made such huge jump. She said, "Yeah, you're on varsity." So we went through the whole season, second team all district again that season. It was just I continued with each season, club and school. My goal was just to make big jumps in my
Yeah.
skill set to continue to close the gap. As I said, that's always been my theme. So that sophomore season, I was just really trying to become more of a defensive and offensive weapon. I was just trying to take all the stuff I learned from club and really be a more well-rounded player. So then following my sophomore season, went back to club for my 16th season, and that was an awesome year.
Mhm.
I had one coach at the beginning, but towards the end, she had to step away from coaching our team for the remainder of the season. So that's when Coach Tracy came back, and
Nice.
she was coaching personally. She has just been such a huge, huge part of my journey. Like, she poured so much time and effort into all of us as a team and myself, and she's just the perfect person for my club journey, really. That season, again, just focusing on getting better all around. I definitely think it was a major difference from 15 season. Video evidence shows that easily. And then, yeah, came back junior season of high school now. I had 2 club seasons in my pocket, and junior season, I think, is when everything really started to click. Like, you could see all the work. Came in, I ended up doubling my stats from the previous year. I got block of the year for my district, broke Trista's record. And then junior year is also when I committed to Utah Tech. And that was when my whole recruiting process had begun earlier that summer. Utah Tech, it's actually quite unique because they discovered me off of my dad's Facebook. One of the assistant coach's brother-in-laws saw my film, reached out to my dad, and since it was pretty late in my recruiting process, we set up a visit after just 2 calls. And but I'm sure we'll get more into the
Right.
specifics.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I think like the biggest thing, like my guess was you had pretty decent height and probably good athleticism, and then that's what coaches saw in you. But the hard part of volleyball is like developing the skill, and the even harder part, I think, is developing like just the IQ, right? Did you find like just the IQ of the game or understand the game harder than the skills, or what did you find was like harder for you to develop between those two?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing for me was catching up my IQ to the athleticism I already had. Initially, like, I remember I had trained for a week or 2 during the summer with my aunt and uncle up at Texas Tech, and I remember one of my coaches was like, "Ooh, like maybe you might want to like transition to an outside," because my lateral speed was so slow because I had so much trouble reading where the ball was going to go. But over time, that's when I started to develop that IQ. Then I was able to move more quickly and react and make those athletic movements that I could make. It was
Right.
just the IQ holding me back. So definitely IQ has definitely been the hardest thing
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. Especially for, middle blocker, undersized as well. It's tough to like read the set and go. I think a big part of that, and I haven't seen you practice or play too much, but I think like I talk a lot about intention. I feel like when you came to your practices and when you were working on your drills, you probably were really focused on like, I'm trying to get better at this. And that with that intention probably made you get that much faster, that much better, that much faster. So yeah, let's talk about Utah Tech, and then I want to talk about your sign day speech too. So I guess like, why did you choose Utah Tech? What did you like about them? Or I know they found you on Facebook, which is like also another thing. You never know who's watching your stuff or where they're watching it from. So I always like to tell people, like especially kids in high school, they're afraid to post things like post away, especially if it's volleyball content. You just never know, right? But go ahead, tell us about why you chose Utah Tech.
Yeah. So for context, my dad worked for the University of Texas's football team. He was a recruiter there. So he definitely has a lot of expertise with the recruiting process. So that was definitely very helpful to us. So early on, we kind of just laid out as a family what my goals or my priorities were for a school. And for me, that was being close to family, being close to a Polynesian influence because I'm Polynesian and I never grew up around anyone else that looked like me down here. So I definitely wanted to go somewhere where I'd be surrounded by people, my people. And then a church influence, a religious influence. My church is also not very strong down here. So I kind of basically I wanted to go somewhere with like-minded people. I wanted to be around my family. I wanted to have all the things I never had growing up in Austin, Texas.
Right.
And honestly, the best place to find all of those things together is in Utah. So we kind of narrowed down our school search to that area mostly. I had initially been talking to a different school. I was planning on committing to them, but Utah Tech, as I said, they jumped in relatively late in the process. I actually already had an official visit scheduled with the other school, so
Right.
late in the process.
Oh, yeah.
once I got there, well, their head coach, Coach Mila, she's Polynesian, she's Samoan.
Cool.
And I definitely thought that was definitely a point of interest for me. I was like, oh man, like a strong Polynesian role model as like my coach. Like, man, that would be awesome. So I went on my visit and I just immediately fell in love with the school, with the coaching staff, specifically Coach Mila. Her coaching style, she's really what she's a teacher. She teaches her players. She's not that coach that yells for no reason, that's harsh for no reason. Like everything she does is with intention, like you said.
Right. Yeah.
And I knew that she was the best coach for me to continue, my journey. And um, they offered me, on my visit, and I accepted it. That was my very first visit, my very first offer. Typically, people like to go through all these visits, all these, spend a lot of time, and that's okay for them. But for my family and for me, we really just wanted to cut the fat on the whole process. And when my dad even told me, he said, Lucia, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much did you enjoy your visit? Immediately 10. He
Right.
said, well, what are you waiting for? Because even I was a little hesitant because I was still trapped in that mindset of still like wanting to make sure I looked at all my options first.
Right.
But when he said, yeah, that was it for me. Utah Tech was a perfect place. And I knew that in my gut, and they checked all the boxes for me. So,
Yeah. I was thinking that too before you even said. I was like, when you know, like sometimes you just know, and there's no need to do the extra stuff just because everyone else does that. So, but yeah, does sound like a great fit for you. I'm glad that you're gonna have that experience of just being around people that you're not used to being around. Obviously, having a great coach is awesome as well. So I think you're gonna do well there. I think you're gonna really enjoy it, and you're probably gonna continue to grow as a player. So I'm excited to see that. So let's talk about now your signing day speech, because I saw that on your profile as well, and I couldn't help to notice that there was just like a lot of just like family influence there, even like your cultural influence I can see. And it stuck out to me. So tell me about that day to you. I'm sure it was a very special day. Just whatever you want to say about
yeah, honestly,
it.
my mom told me before signing day, she said, hey, make sure you prepare a list of people you want to thank. And I was like, yeah, yeah, okay, okay. And I was sitting there at the table and I was like, holy crap, I didn't do anything. And I was like, man, I got to think of something. But I decided, you know what? I'm just going to speak from my heart. And that way I know whatever I'll say, I mean it, and I'll say what I need to say.
Right.
So I stood up and yeah, I was just honest. I just told my story a little bit. I talked about how grateful I was to be here, about, yeah, how every year I had seen all the other girls at their table signing, and I was like, oh, that's going to be me one day. It's going to be me. And man, like the emotions just came out. I just, in that moment, like I really just felt so grateful. I was especially grateful to my dad. Him and me, we've been on this journey together, and he's been running this thing, recruiting wise. So I think that moment, it was kind of him like handing off the reins to me a little bit because we were moving on to our next phase. So I think the whole thing was just very special. And to have my family there also, my grandma was at the table. She's definitely an entertainer. She's awesome. Everyone loves her. Her and my aunts and uncles, they drove up 4 hours from Dallas to be there for my signing, bring me all these leis in from Hawaii and that they made. And then as soon as the
Awesome.
signing was over, they drove back 8 hour round trip just to be there for me. Yeah, my whole life, my grandma and my aunts, especially my auntie Mia and my uncle Tani, they've always been there for me. They've poured so much love and time into me. They were the ones that coached me. They've always been super supportive. My auntie Mia is like my second mom, and for them to be there for me was just incredibly special. And just to have my haku on and all my leis, that's everything I've ever wanted. So that day was pretty much perfect for me.
Yeah, yeah, I can tell, and that's really cool. I mean, that family support is huge. So I'm glad they were there to see that, even if it was 8 hours there and back. But a couple more questions for you, and then we'll kind of wrap up. But you mentioned like a little bit about religion, and part of that was that you chose Utah Tech for that. So has that played any role in your volleyball career at all, or is it just more so in who you are as a person? Or
Oh, definitely. I think my religion has impacted me both on and off the court in huge ways. I think volleyball wise, the two biggest things my religion has provided for me are peace and just seeing things with an eternal perspective, like knowing that volleyball isn't everything, even though, especially as an athlete, man, it feels like everything. Like a bad game puts me into a bad mood for the rest of the day. But I think my religion really just showed me that like volleyball is it's my journey right now, but it is a phase in my life. And then I go on to do bigger and better things, for God, to serve
Mhm.
my fellow men. I think that was one of the biggest things for me was being able to see that it's bigger than volleyball, even if it doesn't feel that way all the time. And then peace. Before every club practice, when I'm with my mom in the car and on my own, we always pray. We always say a prayer, and it just kind of grounds me to go into that practice, play with intention, and just make the most of it and not be nervous. So I think those are two of the biggest things my religion has provided for me.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, I say it in a different way as well. It's not necessarily religion based, but still the same concept in terms of when I teach my players, just like it's bigger than volleyball, or like you can always play volleyball. Like if you don't make this elite team here, like like I'm 33, for example, and I'm still playing volleyball in like local tournaments. Like you can always play and you can always get better. And it's not as like a lot of people like get tripped up about not making like that 13 ones team. Like you're 13 years old, like you have so much more ball to play, right? So yeah, I agree with all that. I think that's great. Okay, so I'm gonna end the podcast with I asked like three questions to every guest we have on here. And then we'll kind of wrap it up from there. Okay. So the first question is if you could play any other position, what would that position be and why?
Okay, been asked this question a few times, and I think it'd be setter
Nice.
because man, I love to be. I'm an undersized middle. I'd love to be big for a position. I'd love to be like a almost 6 foot setter dumping the ball. That'd be so fun.
Yeah, you would be, yeah, you would dominate at 5'11", 5'10" setter for sure. Yeah. That's the position I play too. So I do think it's one of the funnest positions.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I don't think a lot of people would choose middle when I ask that question, but all right. Second question is, um, if you had to give like specific advice to a volleyball player that's in your like actual position, so like a middle player, like a middle hitter, it could be like with skill, it could be with whatever else you think would be helpful. What would you give like another player like that's a middle?
Um, hmm, I would definitely say that working on reading the setter and IQ, like talked about earlier, those are the two biggest things for me that were hard and kind of held me back with my movement and stuff. So I think, yeah, just focusing on reading the setter, learning the ball progression, the cues to look for, I think that would be the biggest thing I would recommend to middles to work on because I think it helps you move so much better.
Yeah, for sure. I like that you mentioned the blocking part first because there's middle hitters and there's middle blockers, and then like everyone likes to hit, but being like a middle blocker is such a key role. You broke the blocking record at your school. Like that shows where your mentality is at when you're playing. You're like, I'm a blocker. I'm trying to block everybody, and you can get
Oh, yeah.
kills too. But that's good. Okay, and last one, just general advice. If you had advice for someone who's currently like an underdog, currently like underrated or underlooked, what would you tell them? Like, how can they create their own volleyball success story?
I would say that one of the my biggest pieces of advice is outwork everyone. I don't care who you're in the room with. I want you to be able to say that you work the hardest there. No one can question your work ethic. I also think that it's very important for you to be willing to be different. Earlier, you touched on social media briefly as well about how you encourage your players to, post on social media. And I think it's really important to understand the importance of social media, not just for your volleyball account, but also just for your main account, like the message you're putting out there into the world. Because once you get to the point where you're in your recruiting process, it's really important for you to be different than everyone else. That applies to the court as well. Like you can't blend in with everyone else, especially when you're the underdog, you're the one coming up. You have to have something that sets you apart. Yeah, I'd say those are my biggest piece of advice. Outwork everyone and be willing to be different. Also, one more thing, my dad always tells me on a scale from 1 to 10, that goes with everything. At one point, he told me, "Hey, we can buy you a car. You can continue to play volleyball. What do you think?" Scale from 1 to 10, I said, 10. I'm playing club volleyball. What are you talking about?
Right,
That's
right.
yeah, making sure you really want it. Because I think if you don't want it, the college life is not easy, and I know it's not going to be easy. So I
Mhm.
think my love of the game is really what's going to keep me going. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's great advice, especially for. I mean, everyone knows that you have to work hard, but being different is huge because everybody plays club volleyball. Everybody has hitting highlights. Like the coaches know you're putting your best plays up. Like showing your personality, or what makes you different matters, right? Especially me, like when I'm a coach, if I'm making cuts or whatever, like if the skill is about the same, or even if it's not quite the same, you look at the
Yep.
personality because you're choosing a player to coach. It's not just like robots, right? So I think that's a great piece of advice. But yeah, that's all I kind of have for questions. Do you have anything else you want to add? You want to tell people maybe like your username in case they want to find you? I'm going to add it in my links as well. But
Yeah, sure. I'm at Lucia Longi on everything, Twitter, TikTok, and Insta. So go follow.
yeah, okay, Corey, thanks for hopping on the call with us, and we'll talk soon. Yeah.
Yep, sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Bye.